Andrei Platonov, the luminary of the Russian dream. 125 years ago, Andrei Platonov was born, a writer whose work transcends the mere label of a satirist. For a time, it became fashionable to interpret Platonov's masterful prose as a critique of Stalinism, seeing him as a man with a sharp wit and a dark humor. Indeed, Platonov was no stranger to irony, and the disillusionment he felt as he witnessed the distortion of the revolution, the suffering of the proletariat, and the ruination of the countryside is palpable in his works. Yet, to call him a satirist is to misunderstand the depths of his vision. Platonov re-emerged during the era of perestroika, alongside other artifacts of the Soviet past. His astonishing language and enigmatic narratives, like the Foundation Pit and Chevengur, leading many to categorize him as a peculiar satirist, yet another critic of the Stalinist regime. But Platonov was far more than a satirist. So, who was he? Platonov was a disciple of Nikolai Fedorov and Alexander Bogdanov, a member of prolet cult, an adherent of Russian cosmoism, and a dreamer, a voice that emerged from the heart of the working class, from Voronezh, from the world of railroad engineering. He was a product of his time, deeply immersed in the grand, often mad projects of global transformation and human reconstruction. In his 1918 manifesto, or creative declaration, Platonov spoke of the creation, the embodiment on our planet of the great human dream, overcoming the oppression of entropy and time, and beginning the transition of humanity into a new physical state, where liberation from death and other existential limitations will occur. This cosmic, metaphysical vision underpins works like the Foundation Pit, to begin constructing on Earth a unified temple of universal human creativity, a singular dwelling for the human spirit. Let us start with the small, let us begin laying the foundation for this future solar temple, upon which, in the end, the heavenly joy of the world will reside. Or consider his poetic outburst from 1922's Blue Depth: we'll extinguish the weary sun, ignite a different light in the universe, give people iron souls, sweep planets from their paths with fire. Here is the cosmic enthusiasm of that era, blending fierce messianism with subtle lyricism. Platonov's work seems primal, as if nothing came before it. His poetry and prose evoke the image of a new Adam, or more likely, a Titan, just opening his eyes to the world, learning to think, to dream, to speak, and already stretching his shoulders, ready to test his strength against the cosmos. Here, in his lines, emerges a new Messiah. Worshippers with bayonets have emerged from Russia to meet God. And with them, a new theology, each one is hungry and dirty, but together all are clean. In these early works, Platonov's worldview and talent far surpass the typical fare of prolet cult. What he truly lacked to ascend to genius was a genuine tragedy. It was this tragedy that would ultimately define Platonov's greatest works, where the once joyful, titanic mythology of the revolutionary years gives way to a tragic worldview. Something had gone wrong. In the Foundation Pit, the early myth of the God-man sweeping away the old universe is replaced by a primordial biblical void, where the earth was without form and void. At one point, Platonov's pinnacle prose was viewed as a biting critique of Stalinism. While he certainly had a sharp wit and a unique sense of humor, Platonov was no satirist. Satire requires a thick skin, a self-assuredness tinged with cynicism. Platonov, however, was a deeply sensitive lyricist, a man of desperate, almost frantic faith, fully aware of his inner turmoil. These qualities create not satirists, but fanatics, philosophers, and poets, roles Platonov embraced wholeheartedly. In Juvenal C., the entirety of Russia becomes a conditional place of truth. At that time, Russia was spending on lighting the way for all nations, but kept no light in its own huts. In Shevengeur, the quest for the truth of communism is led by a new Don Quixote, Kopian Keen, who wanders on a mare named Proletarian Strength, with the name of Rosa Luxemburg in his heart. This is not just a historical epic, it is a desperate search for meaning and truth in a world where the socialist dream is rapidly decaying. But something is clearly going wrong. Communism, which was supposed to be an eschatological kingdom of light where there will be no more death, instead becomes a dystopian nightmare. What kind of communism is this? Not once could a child take a breath, a person came and died. This is a plague, not communism. The utopia has failed, or perhaps it was never meant to succeed. Platonov, who knew firsthand the reality of Soviet construction, guides us through an existential experience of faith and doubt so profound that he ends his major works with the deaths of children, symbols of the socialist future. This leads some, like Joseph Brodsky, to view Shevengeur and the Foundation Pit as extremely dark works. But Platonov's central question is not about the omnipresence of death, but rather, is resurrection possible? And since resurrection can only occur through death, Platonov immerses his characters in the memory of death to see if these bones can live again. If Shevengeur explores the geography of a new world, then the Foundation Pit delves into its metaphysics. The workers dig a pit, first a single pit, then, according to new directives, they expand it. They leave for collectivization efforts, return, and continue digging, but the work never progresses beyond the pit. At the end of the novella, Nastya, who symbolizes the future inhabitant of the Temple of Socialism, dies, and the construction concludes with the digging of her grave. This is the bleak plot of a novella shrouded in impenetrable darkness. The bleakness is amplified by the language, which shatters and distorts all familiar rules of grammar, blending wild bureaucraties with high poetry. The prophetic nature of Platonov's language is illustrated by the real history of the Temple of Socialism, which began in 1931 with the demolition of the Cathedral of Christ the Savior and the excavation of the Foundation Pit for the future Cyclopean Palace of the Soviets. By 1939, the foundation was completed. But by 1960, in place of the never-built Palace of the Soviets, the Moskva swimming pool was constructed, a real history foreshadowed by Platonov's novella. With the star of the Temple of Socialism in his heart, Platonov followed a trajectory from a blinding sun to an underground abyss, returning to compromised ground strewn with unfulfilled and fallen hopes. He seemed to die in spirit along with his characters, never writing anything as powerful as Shevengeur or the Foundation Pit again. As he seemed to prophesy about himself in his first poetry collection. The dead. How the willow in the field mourns. The wind howls on and on. A man's heart aches. Yet he remains silent. Darkness, rain, and endlessness. Not a single star in sight. Candles flicker dimly over the grave. The dead will not forgive life. He lies still, silent, secret. More deadly than death itself. He will wake early tomorrow. By dawn, the candle will have burned out. His gaze is tender, misty. Warmth lingers near his throat. His eyelids fluttered unexpectedly. The beauty of life is gentler still. In this death within life, and life within death, lies the essence of the foundation pit, Shavengur, Juvenal c. and Platonov himself, his era and ours. Platonov represents the Russian dream, the brightest star of this dream, carried through the unrealized noon and dark night of the Russian 20th century. And he is our present hope for a future Russian resurrection.